Welcome and thank you for joining us. My name is Marilise Willemse and I am with Dillon Consulting, and I am part of the team that is assisting the City of Toronto with the engagement program for their official plan review, which is called Our Plan Toronto. I'm joined by colleagues of mine from Dillon Consulting who will help with the discussion tonight, as well as the city team from the City of Toronto that's managing the official plan. Jeff Cantos is with us and he'll be leading some of the presentation, as well as his colleagues Raphael and Cole, who are also going to be answering some questions, as well as any questions that may go into the chat. So tonight, we're going to use both a raised hand function facilitated discussion as well as the chat. And so we welcome you actually at this time to introduce yourselves if you can through the chat and let us know who's here. Let us know where you're joining us from, either geographically with the City of Toronto or organization, community that you're part of, just so that folks can get to know one another in these virtual times. It's nice to be able to share a little bit there. So, thank you, and we'll start off with a land acknowledgement. The City of Toronto acknowledges that we are on the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. The city also acknowledges that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13, signed with the Mississaugas of the Credit, and the Williams Treaties, signed with multiple Mississaugas and Chippewa bands. As part of this project, consultation and discussions, engagement with Indigenous people living and experiencing life in Toronto is part of the program, as well as consultation with the treaty holders and the rights holders and the caretakers of this land who are Indigenous. And so that's a really fundamental core part of the program that we are embarking on through this Our Plan Toronto project. So tonight's meeting purpose is to gather input from all of you who are here tonight and others who are not able to attend but can provide us input through written input on the planning policies needed to address accessibility barriers and achieve a universally inclusive city by 2051. We will, as part of the meeting agenda, walk through what Our Plan Toronto is, what the project is about, provide an overview of the process, speak to the key issues raised related to accessibility so far, so what we have heard, and open up for discussion for you all to share your ideas, your comments, and your vision for where the city needs to go. So with that, I will pass it over to Jeff.
Thanks, Marilise. Can you hear me okay? Great. Welcome, everyone. And I'm going to go through a couple slides. The first one being the official plan purpose. So the official plan is a city document that acts as Toronto's roadmap for land use matters. It sets out our long-term vision, shared values, and policies that help guide decision-making on land development, economic growth, the environment, and more. Through a series of maps and policies, the official plan directs how and where development should proceed, identifies the needed infrastructure, and the appropriate location and mix of land uses across the city. Next. So the provincial requirements. The Planning Act requires all municipalities in Ontario to have an official plan and regularly review it. The Places to Grow Act requires municipalities within the Greater Golden Horseshoe area to update official plans to ensure they conform to the province's growth plan. The province's projected growth for Toronto is the minimum 700,000 people and 400,000 additional new jobs. Official plans consider the following issues: balancing growth and intensification with a healthy environment, achieving an age-friendly, accessible, and inclusive city, addressing climate change as the city grows, and supporting communities as the city grows. The Toronto Accessibility Advisory Committee provided directions to us at City Planning. The committee provided the following directions to City Planning on November 15th, 2021. Accessibility-focused consultation is needed. Gather insights from significant accessibility organizations. Create inclusive city goals through universal design. Require AODA compliance for buildings and open spaces. Broaden, in parentheses, disabilities to include diverse abilities. Complete a jurisdictional scan of other cities for best practices, and seek international insights towards good principles for inclusion. So this slide has two main figures. On the left, it shows the official plan land use breakdown. So on the left, this is a map of Toronto that shows the city boundaries and the location of each land use designation. And on the right is a figure that uses colored squares to break down the percentage of the total City of Toronto land area by land use designations. So for utility corridors, 2.3%, parks, 4.7%, 3.6% is other open spaces, 11.1% is natural areas, 3.5% is apartment neighborhoods, 35.4% is neighborhoods, 5.2% is mixed use areas, 9.6 is core employment areas, 3.3 is general employment areas, and 1% is institutional, and about 19% are roads to which we don't have land use designations. Okay. The official plan accessibility language. So the official plan references the importance and need for a barrier-free city, and the current terms that we use are people of all ages and abilities, accessibility, accessible, universal physical access, disabilities, physical barriers. So a non-policy text example. There is the site plan and accessible design. So council adopted a comprehensive set of accessibility design guidelines, which guide the design, planning, and construction of accessible facilities and the preparation of accessibility audits. And that's found in a sidebar to section 5.13 of the official plan. Official plan accessibility policies. So an example of planning publicly accessible spaces. Access to publicly accessible spaces and buildings will be ensured by requiring that plans for all new and altered buildings, transit facilities, and public works meet city and provincial accessibility standards and retrofitting over time. All existing city-owned buildings that are open to the public and open spaces to make them accessible to users of all ages and abilities. And this is found in our public realm policy 3.1127. Another example of an accessibility policy in our official plan is planning for the future transportation system. The transportation system will be developed to be accessible and inclusive of the needs of people of all ages, abilities, and means by modifying existing transit stations and facilities to become accessible, requiring adequate crossing time for pedestrians at signalized crossings, requiring a minimum number of on and off-street accessible parking spaces, and taking accessibility into account from the planning and design stages onwards. And this is found in policy 2.2.4.17, which was updated 2 years ago in 2020. So our Plan Toronto, this is our opportunity to align city building objectives, priorities, growth-related hard and soft infrastructure, for example, transit, affordable housing, parks and recreational spaces, and many others. And this builds upon current city initiatives to inform land use policies, for example, climate change, mobility. And we're centering equity to help direct growth and development. So some questions we're asking is, how do we address current disparities, COVID rebuilding recovery, and Indigenous reconciliation objectives into our official plan? So we're undertaking a phased study, and here are engagement goals. So back in the spring of 2021, it was the phase of envisioning a future-ready Toronto. And we launched communications and consultation with Indigenous communities and Torontonians. We discussed the vision and priorities for 2051. And fall of last year, we were asking the big questions about housing, employment, and sustainability. In this phase, we set policy directions to support equity in thriving communities. And coming up in May of this year is our plan for 2051 with draft policies. And herein we will be presenting draft policies reflecting the shared vision. Mary-Lise, to pass it over to you.
Thanks, Jeff. So as part of this engagement program, the beginning spring 2021 had virtual initiation kickoff meetings. And in the fall, to address those questions that Jeff mentioned on the previous slide, we had public and stakeholder meetings. And now we've been in a process of follow-up meetings, additional stakeholder meetings, including with youth, Indigenous rights holders, and community champions, as well as others. And through these conversations, accessibility has been raised as a key area for further discussion and is part of the need for tonight's meeting. So some of the biggest challenges we've heard through all of those previous meetings relate to the following key items, but I want to highlight that there was a lot more. There's a lot of detail within all of these. And so this is really a high level snapshot of the big challenges raised as the city grows. So housing supply, access and affordability, environment, climate change and sustainability, equity as it relates to inclusivity, accessibility, discrimination and process, healthy and resilient communities, building complete communities throughout Toronto, COVID recovery, and many others, but those being the core major issues raised time and time again. So I'm going to hand it over to Nicole, and I'd like to encourage folks to share your ideas in those previous phases of discussion. One of the key things we asked people was, what does better look like? What does better need to be in 2051? And to help that guide our discussion, I'll leave it there and hand it over to Nicole for us to have a broader conversation on the accessibility related focus for our future.
Thank you, Mary-Lise. So my name is Nicole, and I will be facilitating the discussion portion of this evening's meeting. We have some guiding questions that we'd like to get your thoughts on tonight, and we will begin our discussion in just a moment. But before that, I wanted to let you know that there will be a 10-minute break from 7:15 to 7:25. And I just wanted to go over a couple more housekeeping items. So if you go to the next slide, Mary-Lise. We want to make sure that we can hear from everyone who would like to participate tonight. Please stay on mute when not speaking. We also ask that you please use the raised hand button in the menu bar to ask a question or provide a comment. If you are on the phone, you can raise your hand by pressing *6, and I will call on you to pose your question or your comment. You can also use the chat function. Mary-Lise will be monitoring the chat and will be reading those questions or comments aloud. And if you are having any difficulties at all using the raised hand or chat function, we will be taking moments throughout the discussion for folks to unmute themselves and speak. We just ask that you do so after a person has finished speaking. Please feel free to contribute in any way that you are comfortable with this evening. We want to make sure that we can hear from everyone. We have about 30 folks on the call, so we're looking forward to an engaged discussion. And I'll just have Mara go back to the slide with the discussion questions there. So firstly, we want to know from the group, what does Toronto need to focus on to achieve an accessible and inclusive city by 2051? And as you've seen through the presentation tonight, some of the key areas of the official plan that we'd like to get your feedback on include housing, employment, environment, and complete communities. And then we'd also like to hear from you, what specific areas of the city do you think need the most attention? I just want to say before I sign off, thank you so much everyone for your feedback and your questions tonight. We will definitely be taking this away away with us as we move forward in this plan. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. So we would like to take the last couple of minutes just to walk through the next steps so that you can anticipate. The city is in the process of writing policies and policy direction for the basis of consultation. We will present draft policies for public input and feedback. And notification, I would like to note that notification will be provided. Everyone who received the invitation for this meeting is now on our broader contact list for when we send out notifications for meetings in the future. So you will hopefully receive those invitations, and we encourage you to share those. There will be a report to City Council with recommended policies, and then if adopted, the city will send council adopted policies to the minister for approval. And at that point, the policies are not subject to appeal. So there's a key process item there. So to stay updated, as I noted, you can go to the City of Toronto website, which is on, I've put into the chat. You can follow us on social media if you are someone with a social media account at #OurPlanTO or at CityPlanTO. You'll hear more about other city activities as well through the @CityPlanTO social media account if you're interested. And of course, through our email that I've put into the chat as well at opreview@toronto.ca. So I'd like to thank everyone for participating with us on this tonight, and for the encouragement from a few folks that are on this call to have a focused meeting such as this, that is something that we really appreciate, and the involvement and the interest has been great to see and to also participate and learn in myself. So I'd like to thank you in that way. Jeff, any final thoughts before we say goodnight?
Just that we're here and we're listening, and we really do appreciate your thoughts tonight, because we hope to incorporate, as much of the feedback as we've heard into our revisions to the official plan. So very much appreciated, and thank you for spending your evening with us. Okay, thanks everyone.